Welcome back to Morning at NTV, and thank you for staying with us. Right about now, we are heading into our next conversation of the day. We're going to be talking about political financing in Uganda right here. So, is the onus on the government to fund political parties in Uganda, or should these political parties be doing it themselves using their membership, membership cards, having their members pay for membership right there? Can they accrue funds for political activities right there through memberships right there? Or can they get this money from outside donors in that regard? Yes. So we are going to be talking about that conversation and a lot more right here on the show. I have Mujuzi in the studio. We are going to be having this banter. So help me end this. Welcome to the show, by the way. Good morning.
Morning. How are you, sir?
So let's talk about the political parties ordinance. Is the onus on the government to fund political parties in Uganda?
Absolutely. So the Political Parties and Organizations Act, okay, of 2006, which was also amended, is supposed to lays out the mechanism of public financing of political parties. Because political parties are supposed to get money that is supposed to facilitate the day-to-day running of their activities. And this day-to-day running is what has been appropriated, I think, for the last 3, 4, 5 financial years. And this is the money that is given out on the basis of numerical representation in Parliament. But also, political parties are supposed to receive public financing to facilitate election campaigns, and now this has not been effected as yet. And of course, you remember in the national budget, I think 10 billion has always been allocated, and for the most part, most of this has been, I think about 80% of it has been going to the NRM that has that percentage of 80% in Parliament. But also political parties are supposed to raise money elsewhere. They're supposed to raise money through membership fees, you know, that every MP, I think every month makes a contribution.
But is it effective to get money through membership cards? Because some members of political parties actually do not get these membership cards. They just say I'm a member of FDC or NRM by word, but they do not actually go there to get these cards.
Absolutely.
So I don't think they can make a lot of money from those membership cards. Are there any alternative sources of funding that they can rely on?
You see, what happens in Uganda is not the ideal. In the ideal world, a political party is supposed to have membership. These members are supposed to subscribe and support the party. What happens in Uganda is the reverse. In Uganda, members subscribe to political parties to get something in return. They subscribe there because they expect something, not they give, but they do subscribe for them to receive something. So those that subscribe, for instance, to the NRM, do so because they expect to get something in return. Those that subscribe to the FDC, the same. So except for a few that are doing it passionately. So political parties don't have membership. They've not been able to kind of mobilize and garner membership. They have not been able to fundraise the way they should have. And this is a problem because political parties are struggling with the funding, and because of this, multi-party dispensation is not functioning as it should in this country.
So in the forthcoming political campaigns, the president is expected to spend almost $200 million US. Where is that money coming from? Is it from the coffers?
Yes, you know, for the case of Uganda, Uganda has a peculiar situation. We released the report. In November, October, November. That was putting a projection on how much the lower candidates would spend. Okay, and then when we went back to do our analysis, we also put a projection on what the presidential candidates are supposed to spend. Now, if you are the incumbent president, for instance, we are projecting that the president will spend in Uganda shillings upwards of 1 trillion. And the reason the president is spending this is that people see the president wherever he goes. They think that at every interaction they should receive something from the president. And the president, of course, has always obliged and gives out money wherever he goes. Now, you understand this, that the people that stand on the ticket of the NRM would expect the president to bankroll their campaigns. You've just seen a letter making rounds in social media of Dr. Yoda to Mwesije, trying to, request the president to roll to bail him out of the money he borrowed from moneylenders, and he's purporting that he spent 850. He borrowed 850 million for just a by-election. Now, this was just a mere by-election. Now, when there is a general election, you expect that for all those NRM candidates who are facing stiff competition from opposition, they would expect the president to bankroll them big. Now, let me tell you this. In 2016, individual members of parliament spent, there are those that spent upwards of 1 billion, okay? Yeah, so the kind of spending that is required, especially in constituencies where an NRM flag bearer is facing stiff competition from opposition, is enormous. And so if the president is going to be the source of this money, and he has also to bankroll his own campaign, plus the party activities as well during the campaigns, he's going to fork out a lot. And we are projecting, at the bare minimum, 1 trillion shillings.
Mr. Muguzi, also $150,000 is too high for the MP to part way with. Now, it's almost 600 million Uganda shillings for an election. Where are they going to get this money, and how are they going to get it back, by the way? Is it how corruption starts? Now,
then we arrive at the real danger we have, okay? This is the challenge we have, that an ordinary MP, if an MP has spent 1 billion shillings, and they do spend upwards of this, by the way, they cannot recover this money from the monthly remuneration of a member of parliament. So what do they do then? This is like forcing them into temptation to engage in activities that are, illicit, okay? So they have to engage in all sorts of corrupt activities, if you may, all manner of illicit activities to recoup this money, for including, when you are a member of parliament, you will have noticed from what has happened in the 10th parliament so far, if you look at the types of legislations coming through, whether it were the amendment of Article 102B, whether it was a bill on sugar, whether it was a bill on regulating the number of years a vehicle should have before it's imported, whether it is a regulation on lottery and so on, they go for these that will return money. And every time, and if you list all those legislations that have been legislated, the bills that have come to Parliament, those have been bills where they have looked big. Now, the ordinary member of Parliament, for instance, as well, also many of them use Parliament as a platform. And you also understand this, that when you are elected as a leader, as an MP, it sort of is a guarantee that things will happen, because lots of people will approach you and would want you to help here and there, and that kind of help would be is the one from which they will charge to recoup the money. So, and in the end of that, day, who suffers? The one who suffers at the end of the day is the voter, the citizen,
the taxpayer,
because the MP, your legislator, my legislator, is not going to serve my interests, because he has to serve interests that point towards him recouping the money they invested. And the cost of standing and contesting continues to rise and rise. Therefore, we are in a situation, and let me tell you this as well, the danger. You see, we are now seeing from our research that there is a growing increase from wealth companies and individuals to invest in campaigns, for the simple reason that if I am a business person, whether I'm foreign or Ugandan, I would be very happy to make sure to have the assurance that on the floor of Parliament or in the district council, I have people that represent my interests.
So won't they influence the decision-making processes at the end of the day? If an individual like Romeo Busiku is funding a political party, won't that influence the decision-making abilities of that party at the end of the day?
Absolutely, it does influence, and this is one of the dangers. This is one of the things that induce nations into a situation we call state capture. Okay, so you have a situation where your country, the legislators, the people who make law, have been captured by some interests, and they are serving not the interests of the citizens, but the interests of those that have captured them. And they have captured them because they were the ones that bankrolled them. They're the ones that financed their campaign. And therefore, they will just do just as they are told by the financiers of their campaign. Now, let me tell you this. Let me draw you back to the letter of Dr. Yoda Tumwesije. Now, if I'm the president, and I have financed you, or you have come to me to bail you out, be rest assured that you're going to do exactly what I need. what I tell you to do, not what your voters tell you to do.
But this is not the ideal way of doing things.
Which is why democracy in Uganda is on its head. Okay?
And the funny thing is the political parties ordinance allows this for citizens to bankroll political parties, but then it does not allow for foreign individuals to bankroll political parties in
Absolutely.
Uganda.
It doesn't.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Do you think there's a loophole there?
Now, we have loopholes. For example, you understand that if you are the incumbent party, for instance, in the case of Uganda, the chances are that when an election comes, you are likely to be voted back again because of the power of incumbency. Now, if I am, for instance, I'm just trying to speculate here. If I am Chinese and I have been enforced by the Committee of Parliament, the Committee on Statutory Agencies, COSASE.
One of those investigative committees.
You remember that committees? Remember that Chinese were forced to vomit money, to return the money they had gotten from Uganda and stashed it away and fixed it on interest-bearing accounts in their country. They were meant to return it. Now, returning this money did not come down well on these Chinese. So if I am Chinese and the election is coming, I have to make sure that on that floor of parliament, I have some good representation. That if a committee does the same in the 11th parliament, there would be at least somebody to sabotage that situation, come up with a minority report that would sabotage the other one. So what I would do is that, so this kind of opens avenues for people with the business interests, selfish interests, to bankroll candidates. So you have a candidate who comes around and is dishing out lots of money and spending a lot, but inside that candidate, when they are voted, there will be...
But the political parties' ordinance is against this.
Now,
Having these foreign
political
entities fund political parties in Uganda to gain tract when it comes to political decision-making processes.
The Political Parties and Organizations Act kind of prevents outlaws. They put a cap, first of all, on the amount of money you can raise from a particular source. But also they outlaw you raising money from companies, from organizations or companies that are unfriendly to Uganda.
Do you think Mr. Chagulanyi broke the law? Do you think Mr. Chagulanyi broke the law when he went to Canada and these other countries trying to solicit for funds for his campaigns in January? Not campaigns, but consultations in January.
He did not break the law.
He did not.
The law says, you should not get money from companies that have declared war on Uganda, companies that are intending to attack Uganda and so on. So I think that definition has to be, as long as there's no, the source from which you are getting this money is not a source that is declared unfriendly to Uganda.
Or meant to destabilize the economy.
Destabilize the politics. Destabilize the politics. Attack the country, support terrorist activities. You can raise money, except there is a cap. I think you're not supposed to raise over, in Uganda shillings, beyond 500 million. There is a cap. But that's for Political Parties and Organizations Act. But for the other international organizations that would want to bankroll candidates, I think they're free to do so. The law is weak there, which is why now we are advocating for a standalone campaign finance legislation that would regulate these gaps to make sure that the politics of Uganda is insulated from threats like these. And these threats are real because they have subjected countries to capture.
So let's now head back to Uganda right now and take a look at the economy as it is. The Ugandan government is bankrolling political parties to run their day-to-day activities. Yes.
Somehow, yes.
Somehow. So can the economy take the weight of financing political parties in Uganda?
The economy of Uganda cannot take the weight of financing political parties in Uganda. The economy of Uganda cannot even be able to provide social services to all its citizens. You can see we are not able to pay teachers, we are not able to pay doctors and so on. So the economy of Uganda is so small. Now listen to this. Every time we have an election, the GDP of this country dips. Okay? If you make an analysis, and we have made a number of these, 2006, from 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016, every time we go through an election, the GDP goes down.
Campaign spending is too high.
Which begs a number of questions. Number one, are we engaging in something that is too expensive for us? Are we ready for this? These, regular elections, conducted every after 5 years. So the economy cannot support this. And so when it comes to political parties, I think I do know for a fact that for this financial year, the financial year that just ended, I think they didn't receive the contribution they were supposed to have received. I do know that the Electoral Commission was not able, for instance, to provide the political parties with the state contributions for election campaigns in 2016 because of budget constraints. You do know that there are elections we could not conduct in new districts simply because the budget was not there. So you do know that right now, I don't know whether the government of Uganda has secured all the financing we need to finance and 2021 elections, because the donors are likely not to put money in there. And so we, in short, the economy of this country may not be able to. But this should be the desirable thing. Now, let me say this.
Okay, if the economy cannot sustain the weight of financing political parties, so should the state let political parties fund themselves, but instead the government should focus on creating equal platforms and opportunities for these political parties to get their message across to the electorate?
Absolutely, I agree. I agree. First of all, the law, there's nothing in the law that stops political parties from raising money. The political parties should raise money. They should wake up, but they're not doing this. Okay, the money that comes from the state, public financing, is supposed to kind of supplement what they have raised. Political parties in other countries have businesses they are running. Political parties in other countries have membership. They have activities. But political parties in Uganda, you even question whether we have political parties in Uganda. You know why? Because these political parties will only come around during elections. Now, after 2016, many of them closed the shop. So you go around now and you will not find any political party offices anywhere in the country other than the headquarters. Now, this is not how political parties work. Political parties mobilize the citizenry. The political parties should be able to change the narrative, because the narrative right now is that people subscribe to political parties to get something, which is why when you go around there, you'll find a voter has an NRM card. At the same time, he has an FDC card. At the same time, they have a DP card. You understand? They're holding on to these as insurance, that when an NRM big shot comes, they're able to flag it. Oh, we are NRM, and they eat from there. And then when an FDC comes, the same people show up. So we need to go back and rethink how we want to do democracy. Political parties have to go back and rethink, because political parties should be able to project the interests, the needs, the aspirations of the citizens, which they're not doing. Because if I asked you now, for instance, what does the NRM stand for? What kind of Uganda do they want to bring? Do you know the ideology of the NRM?
It was supposed to be democracy, but what we are seeing is
So
different.
that, what about the FDC? So what about the DP? I think the only party that had a kind of a philosophy that was clear was CP. Because for them it was clear, we want to bring here a federal system of government, we want the Kabaka to be on top of it, clear. But the others, kind of, it is fuzzy. The point I'm making is this, that political parties are so weak that they've not been able to mobilize membership. Because they have no membership, they've not even been able to sell what they stand for. So why should anybody make a contribution other than one that is for selfish ends to a political party whose philosophy and ideology is not clear? And so I think political parties have to go back. They have to rethink, how do we raise money? And they can, because political parties in other countries have been able to raise money. Why is it hard? For instance, you remember in 2016, we used to see Dr. Kizza Besigye going around, and on some of his campaigns, he would make a stopover, and people would make a contribution, even if this contribution is 1,000 shillings. Because we do know that President Obama, when he was a candidate, the first time he tried the presidency, he got money from these small donors. So people can actually make a contribution, but because people want to capture this citizenry, because political parties have no ideology to sell, they now have to blind people by bribing them, by giving them money. Whether it's opposition, whether it is NRM candidates or parties, they all, when they go to the citizens, instead of selling the philosophy and what kind of Uganda they will want to bring around, They just give people money. So the narrative has been changed. Now, when you go to the voters at the grassroots level, they expect money at every encounter with a political party agent, political party leader, and so on. So we need to change this. And because of this, politics is now a money game. And because it is a money game, issues of ideology have died out. And because the ideology have died out, political parties are just in shambles and so on. But also, because political parties are not being allowed to operate, I think also because the laws we have in place, the institutions we have in place have not allowed political parties to mobilize. And because political parties are not able to mobilize, I think also it is difficult for them to raise funds and so on.
So indeed, so has poor resource mobilization strategies led to the death of political parties?
I think so. I think so. Poor, yeah, absolutely. That you put it right. You see, the lack of resources has made these political parties so weak, and because these political parties are so weak, they are not even able to recruit, to sit back and think. What kind of, because things are changing so fast, what kind of Uganda do you want to bring on board? If you look at the demographic composition of Uganda, the changing interests of the young population and so on, where we are going in the next 30, 50 years, you get to see that political parties are not able to sit down and think, okay? And when they think about mobilizing or coming out to consult and do something, they get to be constrained. I think that again is a challenge. But let me say this as well, that politics, by its nature, is such that once one has power, they keep it. Okay? And so, as a political scientist, I know that the party in power, or the president, has a right to use everything at his disposal to make sure that he keeps in government. So it's incumbent on you, the challengers, to go back and rethink mechanisms and ways. I have always said this. You see, when we were fighting for independence, our grandfathers who were fighting the colonialists faced a far more repressive machine in the colonial government, but they never gave up, okay? The political parties here, every time they want to mobilize, first of all, they cannot want to mobilize when there is no media. Those in opposition. And they want to mobilize around urban centers. And so, if whatever you want to do, you want to sing for the gallery, and you want the party in power to, to make the ground level for you, then you want to go very far. So I think political parties have to go back to the drawing board and rethink how do we survive here? How do we put in place systems that are going to sustain us? How do we challenge the power of the incumbency? How do we navigate the barriers we have that have been put across by the party in power and its machine, to make sure that at least come 2021 we are able to do something.
Let's talk about the legal framework and how it affects financing of political parties in Uganda. The current political ordinance, how does it affect political financing in Uganda?
So I understand this, that whereas the Political Parties and Organizations Act provides for ways and mechanisms of financing political parties, okay, such as prescribing how a political party should raise its funding, such as you are not supposed to receive money from a single source that is above 500 million. You are not supposed to receive money from foreign companies that have declared war on Uganda, or countries that have done so.
So how has that affected financing of these political parties?
Of course, if you found a single source that is supposed to give you more money, like I'll tell you for a fact, for instance, locally, before the European donors decided to come together to form a basket fund called the Democratic Governance Facility, a political party like FDC would go to the European Union and get something. They would go to the Embassy of Sweden, get something. They would go to the Embassy of Netherlands, get something. Okay? So if you picked 500 from European Union, picked 500 million from Embassy of Sweden, picked 500 from Embassy of Denmark, and picked for 500 million from the Norwegian Embassy, that's already 2 billion, isn't it? Today, the European donors have come together and formed one basket So from that one basket, you can only draw not more than 500, and that's what the law says. So I don't want to subscribe to the school of thought that the law has hindered them. I think I want to argue that political parties are not doing enough because there are so many mechanisms. If you are the party in power, for instance, if you are NRM, do we know what are your business sources other than charging a levy from those that are holding your flag in parliament, that are in parliament on your flag? If you go to other countries, if you go to Tanzania, for instance, CCM has business, says it is running. If you go to Rwanda, RPF has businesses, it is running. If you go to South Africa, ANC has businesses, it is running. Okay? So I think political parties have to think, in addition to fighting for political space, they should also think about flexing their muscles in the economic space.
Set up businesses on the side.
Set up businesses so that they can generate income. Some of these can engage in the research. I don't know. But there are so many ways you can think about money. But as it is now, I think one of they are like us who work in NGOs. You see, for the most part, when we think about fundraising, we think about writing a proposal and going to a donor. But there are so many social enterprises you can make to sustain yourselves. So I think political parties have to get clever and raise this money, because without money, right now, there's no way they're going to compete favorably.
Earlier on, you contended that donations influence political decisions. So should the state continue to fund political parties in order to reduce corruption?
So the state should continue and fund them more if we could, because you see, if you look
and you think this will reduce corruption?
If you look at what Norway is doing, in Norway, when you're a political party, you receive all the money that you're going to use for campaigns from government. It means, therefore, that you cannot use any other money beyond that. So that seems kind of serves to level the playing field. Because as it is now, the challenge we are having is that the field is not level. You have a few political actors that have access to far too much money. A few political parties that have access to far too much money. The NRM, for instance, has far too much money. Now, when you come to the other opposition political parties, they don't have the same. When it comes to individuals, there are a few individuals that have far too much money, which has now become a barrier to women, to youth, to participate in these spaces. So if government was sponsoring candidates and political parties, that would level the playing field and lock out those business interests that come in with corruption intents. Number two, when government when government is financing political parties, then it has all the all rights possible to hold these political parties accountable. Because for now, we never get to know where these political parties and candidates get their money, the money they use for funding. There is a law coming that we are pushing for, but also there is an amendment in Parliament that is likely to come through that is requiring these political parties and candidates to declare sources of campaign financing. But even after running the campaign, for them to come back and report, this is how much we spend. So when the state is providing this money, and they used to provide this for also presidential candidates, so I removed that though, then they have all rights possible to hold these political parties to account and report how much they spent them this money and for what. But without that, then we're not going to go very far. But what we have to do now is, I think, what other nations have done to curb the negative effects of getting money from these self-seeking individuals. They have legislated. We don't have a law in Uganda that specifically regulates the financing of election campaigns. The laws we have, the Political Parties and Organizations Act we've been talking about, is a law that speaks to financing of routine party activity.
And indeed, do you think, and indeed there is growing consensus that the Political Parties and Organizations Act needs to be amended. Do you agree?
Yes, because, yeah, and of course, you know, there is a bill. The bill is in Parliament. I think that they have not now been discussed. The report is ready. The Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee has already finished its work. We expect amendments to come through, including that one. And we have also made proposals to that effect. So the amendment is needed and long overdue. The amendment in terms of how do political parties, how do we protect political parties from being over-influenced by foreign companies during election campaigns, and how do we make sure that there is transparency in the manner in which these political parties and the candidates finance the election campaign, so that we are able to tell who is being bankrolled by who, you understand, to prevent the undesirable situation of having a candidate who is, I mean, an MP or a political leader or a political party that is captured by business interests and serving business interests.
Mr. Mujuzi, some political analysts believe that the act needs to focus on the external activities of the parties, and it should leave the internal machinations of the political parties to themselves. Do you agree?
No, I disagree, because you see, political parties are public enterprises that have to be regulated. Now, if you're not able to regulate the internal mechanisms of a political party, then I think you're losing it. Because these political parties do represent and work for the people. They aspire to capture government, and when they get there, they're supposed to serve interests of the people. And therefore, it's important that they are regulated. Their internal activities are regulated. Okay, so I think just as much as we need to regulate the external, we need to also regulate the internal, to make sure that internally these political parties are also as organized and are able to project and represent the interests of citizens.
National Coordinator for the Kampala-based Alliance for Finance Monitoring, Henry Mujuzi. Many thanks for having made the time to speak to us. Well, the conversation has been centered on political financing right there as we head into the 2020 campaigns that will be upon us in August, that will consequently usher us into the February polls in 2021. My name is Romeo Busiku. Let's take a very short breather. We'll be right back.